We're now wrapping up regional events here in the FTC DECODE season. Some of the teams are on to Worlds. Let's take a look at some of the strategies teams should be doing moving towards the next stage in their competition. Probably more worthwhile to be able to go back, collect another couple, and then come back in. I'm Coach Pratt. I've been teaching robotics design for over a decade now, and I've mentored FTC teams to winning national championships and multiple Inspire Award wins. And today we're going to take some more looks at some more advanced shooters that we saw from last week, give you some notes about basing, and then we're going to talk a little bit about strategy and how you can decide about whether it's the right time to pick up artifacts or not, because this season is really being decided by driver practice. And when I talk about being decided by driver practice, let's start by taking a look at a couple of autonomouses here. We've got team 12527 here with the 15 ball or 16 ball autonomous here. I believe this is a team out from Beijing. Super impressive work. I think the most important thing here in autonomous is you want to make sure you're having consistent as opposed to just trying to grab more, because teams that are consistently getting 12 to 15 balls versus teams that are stretching a little bit to be able to get 18 might not do it. And as I've been talking about in the past, the thing that really seems to be holding off these robots from being able to finish up in the end is either shooting a little too quick for their throughput for where it is they need to go, or not aiming in the correct place. From what I've been seeing, it seems to me like aiming lower in this bottom section on the goal seems to be the place that you want to aim for to be able to get a little bit more of those consistent shots, and they're less likely to bounce out at that point. I want to take another look at autonomous here from 24697. And the reason that I'm saying that some of these autonomouses are starting to get decided, or rather DECODE itself is being decided more by driver practice than by autonomous, because teams solo-wise seem to be topping out consistently around the world, anywhere from about 13 successful artifacts in up to about 18 successful artifacts in. When we talk about pathing that is done a little bit better with a partner, we're starting to look at more like between 14 to 18 seems to be a pretty good standard as far as a world-class standard goes on autonomous. That is not a whack load of artifacts in. Like, don't get me wrong, in autonomous, it is a lot of artifacts in. However, I have seen lots and lots of matches where there are really high-scoring autonomouses, but what ends up actually winning that match in the end is driver practice and lots of driver control. We'll talk a little bit about that later. This isn't me trying to talk down teams that are getting, between 15 to 18 to like 20-ish artifacts. Super impressive work. The point I'm trying to make is that getting between that 15 to 18 autonomous isn't really going to be the deal breaker in a lot of these matches. What is going to be a deal breaker is your driver practice and just how much you get in there. I want to talk a little bit about basing strategies as a recognition for that driving practice. First one here is I want to talk about from team 23644. I'm seeing a good chunk of teams go on this little pivot strategy here. I think what's really important with teams that want to try a pivot strategy is sort of like tilt themselves up. I believe the first team to kind of coin this was the Everybots robot, pushing those kind of little kickstand. So you have to make it very clear where you are lifting a robot up from. So if you can't see where those actual service points are without having to get down to the ground, I have seen some referees calling this as it's not an obvious park. And because it's not obvious where the robot is being supported from, it may not be accepted as a valid park. So keep that in mind for teams trying this kind of strategy. Something else I'm seeing on the base here and talking about driver control. Some really impressive work here from 16917, and I unfortunately can't see the robot names. If anybody knows, please let me know in the description down below. But this, you will hear the announcer, and actually I can't play any volume on this because there's some music playing in the back. But you hear announcer start calling in 3 seconds left, 2 seconds left, 1 second left, and then they come in and park. So watch this bottom right-hand section. I'll try to get this out of here. So 3 seconds left, 2 seconds left, 1 second left, come in and park. Basically right down on the money. And being able to fire in more artifacts the closer you are to that, like that is some really crisp driving. They've clearly done a lot of practice being able to get in those robots for that section. So having lots and lots of practice and getting in some of those additional points is going to be absolutely huge, and making sure that you're not spending the last 20 full seconds parking, but really in those last couple seconds to be able to park around, I think is going to be really, really critical. Now, I want to talk a little about a robot here, 21239, just because I think it's a really interesting robot. Apologies for the quality. This is the highest quality that I have. But let's take a look at their autonomous, and I just want you to see how it is that their robot is able to fire in 3. We saw a robot like this similar last week in that it was the turret mechanism that was able to actually shuffle back to be able to fire these in, to be able to get to the pattern that it is they were looking for. So we look at the turret here, and this turret is actually capable of shuffling along a line. And how they've done this is they have a differential system set up on their turret, similar to how some of the claws worked in Into the Deep, where if you rotate both sections of differential, the entire claw will move. If you rotate just one section, it looks like another section of the robot will run a kicker or something along those lines, or perhaps it's running a flywheel. I'm not actually sure how it is they have that run. And then it looks like they have 1, 2, 3 separate kickers. Down at the bottom, they're able to kick it up into kind of a secondary flywheel. It's kind of something that's taken off of an FRC concept, and they have another compliant wheel on the inside that's able to pick up speed for the artifact before it launches into the actual main section. So we can actually see that their whole turret is capable of shuffling along inside of their section. I just think it's really a fascinating piece of engineering, seeing this turret actually move itself in place. It's just really cool to see teams coming up with some unique mechanisms for solving some of that problems. Another thing I think is going to be really critical here is from 23532, as we get further into World Championships and Premier events, is the ability for robots to have a lot of freedom of motion inside of their turrets. So they've got some sort of either hard stop set up on this, likely a limit switch. Perhaps they have a Hall effect encoder on this, or they have an encoder on side of this as well, so that they know when it is that they've reached the end of their turret. In fact, I'd probably recommend you have both a hardware limit as well as a software limit, so you can't go full 360 around and end up ripping out some of those cords. But you end up getting some really impressive performance on it, and I think that being able to have more range on your turret is something that's going to really help teams really get into that kind of top 1% of the competition moving forward. Now, last thing I want to talk about here is some of the strategies that I'm seeing some of these teams employ. And a really big question. Let's take a look at some footage here from 19053. Just doing some FAR auto practice here. Not auto, this is TeleOp practice. One thing that I'm seeing from teams is that rarely do you want to make shots. And I don't want to say never, because only Siths deal in absolutes. But rarely do you ever want to make shots that has just one artifact in your hopper. You almost always want to have minimum 2, if not 3, for 95% of your shots. Now, I think that the argument can be made for having just a couple artifacts if there's a couple loose out by your goal. 2, totally fine. But if it's just 1, I don't think you're going to be getting some of these really high ranges. Teams that seem to be performing really high, and let's just take a look at the teleop section here, because I think that autonomouses are really strong. This is state finals here. We've got teams 23305, 19745, 18225, and 23849. We've seen some of these robots on the channel before, as well as you may have seen them some around. Some pretty impressive stuff, but let's take a look at the decision that these drivers make. Now, the red team is starting to fight against each other a little bit here. They really got to watch that. But the decision that some of these drivers make, and I believe that this ends up being a really close match between these two teams up until a point where there is a major penalty that ends up being called, or a minor penalty that ends up being called, and it ends up being a pretty large swing in terms of points. But if we look at the teams that start to climb up really quickly here, it is always making sure that you have at least 3 in the hopper. And I think here, looking at this blue team, we can see that they've only got a couple in the hopper, and they actually end up falling a little bit behind this in that case as well. So in my opinion, it seems to me like you almost always need to be shooting with 3 in the hopper. If you're just going to be shooting 1, it's almost more worthwhile to be able to go back and get a couple more artifacts and then start launching some more in as well. Also speaks to the importance of playing defense. We see that team 23849 here is doing an excellent job bullying team. This is 23305 as it is. They're coming in basically every time that 23849 comes up to this far triangle and the other red alliance member is there. They're running into them and pushing them out of the way as it is they go to actually pick up this section. I think that, making your opponent lose points is almost as good as you being able to win points yourselves. Whereas it's really only in the tail end of this match where 19745 actually even starts to get a little bit of defense played against them. And if you have a robot on an opposing alliance that has a really high throughput and has a really quick drivetrain, likely they're not going to be strong against defense. And what ends up happening is if you let them just play freely, like if we take a look here, we can take a look at 19745. If you let an opponent like this just play freely, they can pick up 3, go into the Blue Alliance's secret zone, pick up another 3, go back inside of Blue Alliance's secret zone, go back, pick another 3, go back into that secret zone without any bullying being played against this member, the points really can start running away rather quickly, which is something that we do start seeing inside of this match. So that's something to keep in mind, is that I think if, or at least in my opinion, it seems to be, that if teams are starting to run away with some of these points, you really have to start bullying in some of those defense. We saw that last week when we looked at the Romanian current world record. Let's take a look at a team here from Ice Robotics and Purple Robories inside the Red Alliance, which is 11,329 and 21,945. Again, we're just going to take a look at the TeleOp section here. And the thing that I want you to look at inside of this is when you look at the Red Alliance, as they go to fire in their artifacts, how many artifacts they have inside the robot before they decide to actually fire. And on the Red Alliance, the vast majority of the time, it is 3. Very rarely do 2 start coming in. And again, we start talking about the importance of that defense being played. We can take a look at up here against the Red Alliance. This would have been a great chance for Blue Alliance to be able to come in and hit. But there's actually quite a few shots where the Blue Alliance almost seems timid or scared to actually come in and actually hit up against that opposing alliance. And I think that that's something that has been a pullover from previous seasons. And in my opinion, teams really need to get used to this season, where it is a lot more aggressive driving being played. You do need to play a lot more defense, similar to what a lot of FRC games have been having. Teams need to play a ton of more defense. So when we start looking at these scores start to run away here for the Red Alliance, we can see that the vast majority of the time, the Red Alliance is firing 3 artifacts every single time. Coming in and just grabbing 1 artifact is more worthwhile to go back and get 2 or 3. And even then, when I say 2 or 3, I really do mean that for the most part, you really should be firing 3, unless, of course, you had a section like that where I would say that was probably a misplay on Reds there, just to fire in just 1 artifact. It's probably more worthwhile to be able to go back, collect another couple, and then come back in. And we kind of see this when the score ends up coming out in the end. It is, over 300, really, really solid score. Really solid score. Without any defense being played against it, having in 3 artifacts, in my opinion, seems to be absolutely critical to these teams actually having success in making in that. Now, there's the odd time where just a couple might make sense when you have maybe 2 on this section and you don't have sort of an empty section on the back. I think that's really important. And you might want to start thinking, what kind of drills can you start playing with an opposing alliance or with your robot here to be able to practice when you are kind of quite dry, so to speak, in the amount of artifacts that you have, when you can have these fully loaded hoppers up popping up. It comes down to the importance of practicing with your sister teams and practicing lots of defense. I'm curious what your thoughts on this so far has been this season. I mean, this is what I've been observing. I'm curious what you've been observing and making that coming up in your matches. Have teams that have been firing 3 been the teams that seem to be performing well inside of your competitions, or have you kind of, a couple of cheeky double shots being able to help you through on this? If you see something out in the FTC community you think other people could benefit from, I've got a submission form down below. If you're looking for CAD files and code snippets, portfolio stuff, that kind of thing to help you out with more resource, you consider joining my community down below. And as always, best of luck out there this season.